So have you heard the story about the professional viola da gamba player who was not allowed to buy a separate seat for her instrument like she always had for years, many years in the past? And so she had to check her instrument, her 17th century instrument, and it got severely damaged? Or have you heard the story about the guitar player who traveled on a particular airline and was forced to check his instrument, and when he got it back at his destination, it was wrecked? Or the professional cellist who flew on this particular airline, always bought a seat, never had a problem until this one particular time when they would not let him stay on the airplane with his bought seat for his cello, and they booted him off? If you have or haven't, I don't want that happening to you, especially when you're flying with your musical instrument. Hi, I'm Donna Schwartz from DonnaSchwartzMusic.com, the site for practical tips and solutions to improve your music performance skills. This is a part 2 in my series of flying with musical instruments. And in this part, I want to go over some of the specific guidelines for a few of the airlines, as well as some general advice before you board the plane. Now, in part 1, I talked about being prepared, and we really hit home with types of cases that you should use, not having accessories flying all over the case, calling the airlines beforehand, being prepared. In this particular part today, I want to go over some general guidelines, in particular for United States people, the Department of Transportation rules that went into effect in March 2015. Now, I have a link underneath in the show notes, so to speak, for both my Part 1 article and my Part 2 article. And in the Part 2 article, there's a link to those guidelines from the U.S. Department of Transportation. There's also other links as well. One to one of the stories I spoke about, and one to a really incredible link for musicians all over the world with regard to each airline and their policies towards musicians flying with instruments. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit later. So I wanted to talk about first some general guidelines that you should just be aware of when you're flying. Number 1, those U.S. Department of Transportation guidelines specifically talk about carrying your small musical instrument, and they go on to talk about like a violin or a guitar. Now, the interesting thing is that a guitar, to me, is not a small instrument, okay? In fact, they probably came out with these guidelines after that horrific incident to that person's guitar that got wrecked. In fact, I forgot his name off the top of my head, but he immediately created a video that went viral that really lambasted the airline and their treatment of his instrument. And you know what? Good for him, because our instruments are very valuable. Some are not replaceable, and it's our livelihood. And we shouldn't have to spend extra money to repair our instrument when people are not treating the instrument with care or not treating us with respect. So anyway, one of the things to keep in mind is that they say that a small instrument, the guidelines are basically for small instruments, but also for carrying on other instruments as well, and what you should be expecting and what the airlines should be adhering to. Now, it's very easy to fit a flute or clarinet. An alto saxophone should be fine in the overhead bins in just about any airline carrier. The problem comes when you have either doubles, like a doubles case, or you have a tenor saxophone, cello, definitely a bari saxophone, bassoon, all those types of instruments. That's where it gets a little bit muddy, a little bit unclear. And that's where we have to do a little bit more research and a little bit more speaking to people, speaking to representatives from the airlines. The first thing that we want to consider is that you should think about figuring out or finding out from each airline that you're going to fly on your route what the dimensions are for the overhead bins. Now, they're generally around, and I have this in my article, but they're generally around 22 by 14 by 9 inches. Okay, around that, give or take an inch or two. That's not very big, all right? That can fit definitely a trumpet case and flute, clarinet, that kind of thing. An alto sax should be able to fit that, especially if it's a contoured case that is sturdy and your instrument's clamped and all that kind of stuff on the inside. But tenor sax cases, that's very tricky. It's very hard to do. I'm going to give you some tips about how to get your instrument on most airlines. And again, this is not foolproof, but this is what's helped a lot of people, including myself, get my instrument on as a carry-on. Bring a tape measure, okay? Measure your instrument case, write down the dimensions, and bring the tape measure with you when you go to the airport, okay? So that's the first tip. The other thing that you need to do is look at online, look at the airline that you're flying, and look at their contract of carriage, and search for musical instrument policy. In there, they're going to be pretty specific about what they allow and what they don't allow as a carry-on. Now, of course, you could always check your instrument, check it as baggage, unless it weighs more than like 150 or even 165 pounds, then there's an issue there. But if we want to bring it on as a carry-on, we're pretty limited as to what we can do. And again, I'm going to give you a couple of tips about that later. The one thing I want you to keep in mind, and this is through calling a bunch of airlines and speaking to a bunch of representatives, the bigger the plane, the bigger the overheads, all right? And that's pretty much common sense. But what I've noticed with some of the bigger planes, even though the length of the overheads are bigger, it doesn't mean that the depth is. So that's just something, I just want to put that out there because I noticed that on one of my recent trips. And I'm going to tell you about a story that happened to me as well. Another bad thing is that many airlines will not assume liability if something happens to your instrument. I'm going to say that again. Many airlines will not assume liability if something happens to your instrument. So if you think that you get damaged and you could just sue them, in that contract of carriage, they're going to say that, all right? It's going to say it under musical instruments or under fragile items, all right? That's another area to look for. Keep that in mind. So as I said in my Part 1 article and in my Part 1 video, make sure you have instrument insurance, all right? And make sure you look at the terms of your instrument insurance to make sure that you are covered when flying on a plane, okay? Super important. Oh yeah. Airlines also won't assume a liability if your instrument's in a soft case or a gig bag. I would never fly with my instrument in a soft case. It should be in a hard case, a hard shell case, or some kind of composite material that's super durable, okay? And I talk about cases in my previous video and also my previous Part 1 article as well. As another general tip, the best thing that you can do, and I know it's going to cost you money, but the best thing that you could do is get priority boarding. Early boarding, whatever it's called for whatever airline you're flying on. Why? Because you'll be first in line to get into the overhead bin space. Now, I've heard stories of people carrying Barry saxes and getting them on as carry-ons in the overhead bins, and this is one of the ways that they're able to do it. One of the things that the Department of Transportation regulations say is this: once you are on that plane with your instrument, right, and it's in the overhead or you bought a seat for it, technically the airlines are not allowed to remove you from the plane or to take your instrument off to make room for another passenger or to make room in the overheads for other passengers' baggage. All baggage is created equal. It's supposed to be equal in their eyes. So once you're on the plane itself and you've got the instruments to carry on, you should not be removed. Your instrument should not be removed. You should be not asked to take it off. Now, you may say to me, oh, well, great, you're saying that, but they're doing this to me anyway. Another tip is make sure that you print out the Department of Transportation regulations. And again, if you go to my article that's listed in the link below, there's going to be a link there for the Department of Transportation. It's new guidelines effective March 2015. Print out, I think it's like 6 pages, and highlight the areas that deal with the larger instruments, okay? Super important. The reason why also is this. You could speak to a representative on the phone with regard to your reservation and your concerns about bringing your instrument, but unfortunately, the decision is based upon the flight crew and security and all the people when you're at the airport. And I say unfortunate because that story that I mentioned with the professional cello player never had a problem buying a seat for his cello, and then all of a sudden on this one flight, They said, oh, that's not a cello, that's something else, and that, that doesn't meet the requirements. You have to check it, or get off the plane. He already had permission. He's been doing this a long time. He's been following the rules. And then this one person who was misinformed, I'm going to say ignorant, and he left the plane. Luckily for him, they realized that they screwed up, the airlines, and they put him on the next flight. They refunded his ticket for his cello seat, and he got to his destination safely and with barely enough time to make his concert. But the thing to keep in mind, print out the guidelines. Highlight it, bring it with you, bring a tape measure with you, just in case. And also as another note too, as a tip, be calm, be cool, be patient. If you fly off the handle, people get defensive and you're not going to get what you need. All right? Sometimes, like I said, people are ignorant or they're misinformed. And as as part of my research, one of the comments made was that the people that are, when you call for reservations, the people you speak to are not as informed as the people that are at the airports, and vice versa. All right? So there's a lot of miscommunication going on there, even though these rules have been out since March 2015. We're coming up to 3 years already, and there's still issues with this. Now, I mentioned it before, and I'm going to give you more information right now. An incredible resource for researching each airline all over the world, not just the United States, but all over the world, is provided by the International Federation of Musicians. I have the link in my article below, the part 2 for flying with your instrument. It can be a lifesaver for you. Now, I'm going to say that in that resource, which is terrific, they have a rating system. Okay, green means that the airline follows the US DOT requirements. Amber, the yellow color, means that they don't quite follow the requirements, but the overhead bins are close to being the dimensions that are required, and it's close to being a green status. Red means that there's problems. Okay, red means that that airline is not necessarily musician friendly. Now, I've got to be honest though, I was looking at the ratings for some particular airlines, and I don't quite agree with the green status for some of them. You're going to see what I'm talking about when you read my article. And this is based upon stories I've heard from people, articles I've read online, and also particular incidences, and one in particular of mine. So I normally fly JetBlue. I like JetBlue. And with JetBlue, the only issue is that their overheads, even though they're big, they're divided. So most overheads, and you're going to see a picture in my article of an overhead from Delta's planes. They're very big. The lengthwise is very big. Well, JetBlue has half the length size. It's like they have dividers in there. So I can't fit my tenor sax up in the overhead because it just won't fit. I can fit my alto, I can fit my trumpet, I can't fit my tenor. So what I've done is I've secured my instrument in my case, key clamps on, nothing flying around, and I've gate checked it. And what I like about JetBlue when I gate check, I bring it up to the plane, through the plane bridge, I'm up to the door going to the plane, and I give it to the gate attendant, they hand deliver it, and they put it on last in the cargo area. When I arrive at my destination, I wait outside the plane, in the plane bridge, and they bring it to me. All right, that's what I was used to, that's what I am used to. But I found out recently, not every airline does that. Now, before I talk a little bit more about my situation, a lot of people are saying, Donna, why are you gate checking your instrument? Just try to get it on the plane. Well, with some airlines, when I spoke to some representatives, they said, hey, if you get on early and it doesn't quite fit in the overheads, ask if there's space in a closet where you can store your instrument, because maybe there will be, especially if you've got priority boarding. And for some people that does work, especially if you're able to get on early enough, but sometimes that doesn't work. I haven't had that luck myself, but I also have never had a problem gate checking my tenor sax flying on JetBlue. Never had a problem. Never had any damage or needed repairs or anything like that. So I've been lucky. Okay, so recently I've had to fly Southwest because the destination I was going to, Southwest was the only airline going there. So I was really nervous. So I called the airlines way before. I did my research. I spoke to a bunch of people, up to supervisors, all that kind of thing. And I got, the earliest boarding that I possibly could. So I go there, and I figured that, I asked about gate checking. I figured, okay, if JetBlue gate checks and, people bring the instrument back and forth to the plane bridge is cool, I'll do that. So I researched that, and I got iffy answers. And I should have followed my gut, and I should have tried to get the instrument on the plane. I was basing my decision on JetBlue's small overheads. My tenor sax would have fit in the overheads for Southwest. The only snafu is that with the overheads with Southwest, the depth is not there. So my tenor would have fit in one bin, and there would have only had to been soft bags going around it. So that was the thing, to keep that in mind. And the other thing, too, to keep in mind, even though you're putting your instrument in the overhead bin, do not pack it in a soft case. Again, it's got to be a hard case, because people, you see them, they cram their stuff in there, they shove it in, and they're going to be pressing against your instrument case. You got to make sure that that case can withstand that. So if I would have known beforehand and done my research like I did for this article for you, I would have asked about the overhead dimensions, and I would have taken the chance and brought it on the plane. So I gate checked my instrument at LAX, and I was told that I would get my instrument hand-delivered when I got to Dallas. Well, that didn't really happen, and I got really nervous, and I said to them, look, this is a very expensive instrument, and I can't have this going down a conveyor belt. Long story short, since Dallas is a smaller airport, they actually did hand-deliver it, not to me personally, but they hand-delivered it to the supervisor in the baggage claim area. I quickly opened it up, no problem. Okay, so I was lucky. So then I thought, okay, so they'll probably do the same thing on the way back. No, they didn't. On the way back from Dallas to LAX, again, I gate checked it. When I got to LAX, they did tell me they were going to deliver it to me at the plane bridge. They actually said that. The cargo people told me that. They didn't do it. And then they said, oh, no, we'll deliver it to the baggage claim area, the oversized baggage. So I go there. I'm waiting. I'm waiting. I'm waiting. Nothing. I'm waiting for half an hour. I'm talking to everybody in creation. And then finally, the clerk in the overhead area says, oh, is that your instrument on the conveyor belt? And lo and behold, there it was. And I was so angry. I'm sure you can imagine. I did suffer a little damage from that. And obviously, the first thing I did, I looked at my instrument, and then I went right over to a supervisor, and I let him have it, because that was unacceptable. If the communication should have been a lot better, all right? If you do not deliver to the plane bridge, or you do not deliver to the baggage claim supervisor, you have to let the customer know that. And now I'm letting you know that, so that doesn't happen to you. So if you do fly Southwest, which they claim that they are musician friendly, I personally don't feel that. Just know that gate checking is not your best option, and try to get priority boarding, which means that there's no specific seats on Southwest. You're boarded in sections, A, B, C, all that kind of stuff. So what you need to do when you make your reservations, exactly 24 hours before your flight, get online and check in. And then you'll get in the A boarding section. Those are the people that board, not first, but second. You get the priority boarding people first, and that's where you pay extra for the ticket. That's another option. So that's another little tip for you that I found out from my last trip with Southwest. Now, the other thing that I found out after speaking to the LAX supervisor and then speaking to a representative on the phone from Southwest, I mentioned about gate checking, and he said, yeah, you could gate check it, but since they allow more baggage than most other airlines, they may not be able to fit your gate-checked instrument because it's the last one to go in. And they will not put it on the plane. And they won't tell you. Supposedly, they have no way of alerting you or telling you. So you'll be flying to your destination not knowing that your instrument did not go with you if you gate-checked it. That's disturbing to me. Now, they said it would go on the next flight over, but I said, what if I have a show and I have no time to wait in the airport for my instrument to come over? And they had no answer for that. So I want to let you know that, put that out there. That to me is not musician friendly. All right? So I'm here to inform you about that. Now in the article, I talk about a couple of other airlines like Delta, JetBlue, all those type of things. I give you a couple dimensions and such. But use that resource that I mentioned in the article. Search up your own airline, but don't just use that link or that research. You've got to call the airline, okay? Talk to people. Talk to people in Facebook groups. Talk to friends. I personally am not familiar with the European airlines, and I hear that they have a harder time with this stuff. Talk to a lot of people. Document everything. If you talk to people on the phone, get their name, any other identifying information, write down the time and the day that you spoke to them. Document it, print it out, but follow the tips I gave you before. Print out the US DOT guidelines, bring a tape measure, measure your instrument case before you go. Read my Part 1 article about how to secure your case, the types of cases, being prepared, all that type of stuff. And you'll have a better chance at success with flying with your instrument. So I hope you enjoyed this video and the article. Please click on the article, like it, share it with as many musicians as possible, because we want to inform as many people as we can so that you don't have these horrible stories and tragedies happening to your instrument. All right, so if you like this video, hey, like it, share it, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and check out my website, donnaschwartzmusic.com, for the freebies that I have available when you sign up to get your weekly newsletter filled with tips and practical information for you. All right, on that note, thanks for joining me. Take care. Have a great day.